Roman soldiers was filled with challenges, and proper nutrition was essential to sustain them during military campaigns. Let's explore the main foods that made up a legionary's diet. Grains were the foundation of Roman nutrition, including for soldiers. The Latin term frumentum was commonly used to refer to grain supplies, which made up about 60% to 75% of the total weight of Roman rations. Typically, soldiers preferred wheat, while barley was considered an inferior grain. However, in times of need, barley could be distributed as an alternative. For example, during the siege of Caesar's forces by Pompey in Dyrrhachium, Caesar's men had to resort to eating barley. A similar situation occurred with Octavian's troops during the campaign in Dalmatia in 34 BC. Since barley was often reserved for feeding horses and livestock, receiving it as rations was considered degrading and could significantly lower troop morale. The practice of frumentum mutatum involved punishing a unit by replacing their wheat with barley and removing meat from their diet. Another common food among soldiers was bucellatum, a simple biscuit made of flour, salt, and water. Known for its hardness and long shelf life, this biscuit was baked twice at low temperatures to ensure it stayed dry, making it ideal for the harsh conditions of long marches. Besides being a quick energy source, bucellatum could be produced in large quantities, making it indispensable during military campaigns. Meat played a crucial role in the diet of Roman soldiers and was primarily obtained in two ways: through hunting and by seizing animals from the local population during military campaigns. The legionaries often ventured into forests to hunt wild animals, which not only provided fresh meat, but also served as exercises in survival, skills, and teamwork. Hunting became essential in regions with limited food supply or when supply routes were disrupted. In addition to hunting, Roman troops also confiscated domestic animals from local communities, including cattle and pigs, to sustain the army during long marches and battles. This method was common and often vital for maintaining the forces in prolonged campaigns. Salted pork, in particular, was favored due to its durability and low cost, making it ideal for extended journeys and harsh conditions. It was consumed in various forms, whether cooked, roasted, as sausages, ham, or even bacon. Besides providing meat, pork fat was also used in the production of biscuits. During military campaigns, smoked or salted meat was especially valuable for sustaining soldiers. However, in extreme situations, legionaries had to adapt and consume whatever was available to survive, including hunting animals like deer and rabbits, whose meat was cooked to make it more palatable. These practices were only adopted in times of urgency, when regular supplies ran out and the survival of the troops depended on drastic measures. Another source of fresh meat, in addition to hunting and confiscation, another way Roman soldiers obtained fresh meat was through sacrificial rituals. It was customary in the military to sacrifice cattle and other animals before significant battles. These purification rituals involved the participation of soldiers who consumed the meat of the animals offered to the gods. One such ritual, known as suoveterilia, involved the ritual sacrifice of oxen, sheep, and pigs. Depending on the soldier's background, the commander would also provide the famous fish sauce, garum, which was highly valued both for the flavor it added to food and for its supposed nutritional and medicinal properties. Legumes and fruits. Legumes such as beans, lentils, and peas were essential protein sources, especially for the lower classes in ancient Rome. There is evidence that these foods were a regular part of soldiers' diets. Besides adding variety to meals, legumes were vital in providing necessary nutrients. Although vegetables are not frequently mentioned in historical records, they also played a significant role in the legionaries' diet, mainly because they were easy to store and transport, making them ideal for military campaigns. These simple and inexpensive foods were crucial for maintaining the army's provisions. Fruits, with their high sugar content and nutritional value, would naturally be useful for an army, especially since they could be dried and stored for extended periods. However, fruits are rarely mentioned as a regular part of soldiers' rations, even though they are occasionally found at military archaeological sites. An example mentioned by Polybius highlights that Philip V obtained a supply of figs for his army during the Second Macedonian War against Rome, but this only occurred in a situation of extreme famine. It is almost certain that fruits were not part of the regular rations for Roman soldiers. Fruits were likely acquired from merchants who sold them directly to legionaries, allowing them to supplement their diet. Additionally, soldiers could gather available fruits from the regions they passed through, diversifying their meals and adding nutrients. Cheese. The Romans consumed cheese made from cow, sheep, and goat milk. Although cheese is not widely cited in ancient texts as an essential food for soldiers, the Historia Augusta, written by Suetonius, mentions cheese alongside salted meat and wine as part of the troops' diet. The discovery of cheese presses in various military camps suggests that soldiers frequently made their own cheese. Given its lightweight and ease of transport, it is likely that cheese was a significant part of the soldiers' diet during campaigns. Even though there are few direct mentions of its consumption, the presence of tools for cheese production indicates that this was a common practice, providing protein and calcium in a durable form during marches. Wine and water. In general, each Roman soldier carried their own canteen or water skin. Water was stored in leather bags, wooden vessels, or other containers, and camp locations were strategically chosen based on the availability of water sources. Water collection was a common task assigned to available soldiers, requiring no special expertise. Caesar often described logistical operations of his legions, noting that water supply was a priority when establishing a camp. Groups of cohorts were dispatched to ensure the water supply and fill the skins. Additionally, wine diluted with water for purification was widely consumed by the soldiers. This mixture, known as pasca, had a sour taste and was considered a type of energy drink, often enriched with herbs and spices. Recent research indicates that pasca was actually quite beneficial for health, being rich in antioxidants and vitamin C. The seeds of coriander and other herbs used in the drink offered medicinal benefits, and its high acidity, giving it a vinegar-like sour taste, helped kill bacteria in the water. This was especially important at that time, considering that water was not as clean or treated as it is today. Pasca was looked down upon by the upper classes, but widely consumed by the lower classes in Rome, becoming a standard drink in the military from the 3rd century BCE. This beverage helped boost energy and improve troop performance, as other alcoholic drinks could cause stomach discomfort during battles and marches. Salt and olive oil. Just as the term frumentum referred to grains, the terms cibum and cibaria referred to the soldiers' food supplies as a whole. Rations were generally divided into main categories: meat, vegetables, cheese, salt, and sour wine. Additionally, rations could include olive oil. Salt played a crucial role in preserving meat and other perishable foods used to extend their shelf life during military campaigns. Numerous literary sources document the extensive use of olive oil by the Roman army, not only for cooking, but also as an essential component in food preservation. How food was prepared. The preparation of these foods took place within a contubernium, the smallest unit of the Roman legion, and was a critical task to ensure soldiers were well fed during campaigns. Each contubernium consisted of 8 soldiers who shared a tent during marches and encampments. These soldiers not only lived together but also shared daily responsibilities, including meal preparation. Those assigned to cook within the contubernium were responsible for everything from gathering and preparing food to distributing it equally among all soldiers. Generally, Roman soldiers had 2 meals a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and often had to improvise with available resources to meet the unit's nutritional needs, even during times of scarcity or logistical challenges. Join us and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy the video and be a Praetorian. Thank you, my friend. Among all the Roman legions, the 10th Legion stood out as the first to be personally created by Julius Caesar, playing a vital role in the Gallic Wars under his direct command in almost every battle of the campaign. In this video, we will explore what made the 10th Legion Caesar's favorite, as well as his personal bodyguard. Foundation of the Legion. During Julius Caesar's time, legions were identified by numbers rather than names. Historians refer to a 10th Legion created by Caesar during his tenure as provincial governor in inland Spain. Upon arriving to assume this post in 61 BC, Caesar immediately decided to subjugate the western and northwestern regions of the province. At that time, Caesar already had 2 legions in Provence, the 8th and 9th, which had been enlisted by Pompey in 65 BC. However, he still needed a 3rd legion for his campaign, leading to the formation of the 10th legion, which was ready by March. The 10th legion adopted the bull as its symbol, which appeared on the shields of every legionary and the legion's standards. The Romans deeply valued the power of the zodiac and were highly influenced by horoscopes. Therefore, the unit's birth sign was also present with every legionary. The 10th legion's fame is largely due to the accounts of its actions recorded in Caesar's Commentaries, where he narrates his military operations during the Gallic Wars in the 3rd person. Caesar's military campaigns, 58 BC, 44 BC. The 10th legion played a crucial role in the Gallic Wars. The 10th legion fought under Julius Caesar's command in nearly every battle of the campaign. At the outset, Caesar led this legion, along with the 7th, 8th, and 9th, to Hispania. Shortly thereafter, in the summer of 58 BC, the 10th participated in 2 significant battles at Erar and Bibracte. Additionally, it played a crucial role in defeating the Helvetii, preventing them from migrating from what is now Switzerland to Western Gaul. Disciplined and highly trained, the legionaries and auxiliaries not only demonstrated bravery on the battlefield, but also during what were supposed to be moments of rest, which were actually used to prepare the camp. During these times, they would swap their spears for shovels, digging rectangular trenches around the tents and erecting fences around the perimeter, ensuring they were never caught off guard. Their organization and joint combat tactics allowed them to face forces much larger than their own, even when outnumbered. After the victory over the Helvetii, the leaders of the Gallic tribes sought Caesar's help against Ariovistus, king of the Germanic Suebi tribe. Before the battle, Ariovistus proposed a peace conference but insisted that both sides be accompanied only by mounted troops. Ariovistus knew that Caesar's cavalry was primarily composed of Aeduan horsemen, whose loyalty to Caesar was questionable. Recognizing this, Julius Caesar ordered a group of his auxiliary troops to dismount and instructed the legionaries of the 10th Legion to ride the horses and accompany him to the conference. In his own words, Caesar wrote that since he could only bring cavalry, he decided to have all his legionaries dismount. Caesar decided to replace the native irregulars with men from the 10th Legion, knowing he could trust them completely. With these soldiers around him, he would have an absolutely loyal bodyguard. One of the legionaries joked with Caesar, saying they had been promoted to the rank of knights, or the equestrian order. At that time, the Roman equestrian order was made up of aristocrats, ranking just below the senatorial order. From this episode onward, the 10th Legion became known as the Equestrians. Later, in the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC and the Battle of Munda in 45 BC, Caesar placed great trust in the 10th Legion, positioning them on the far right of his battle formation, a place of both prestige and significant danger. He cited an example of this trust during his campaign in Gaul. Upon finding some of his officers fearful, Caesar gave a stern speech challenging those noblemen. He gathered the officers and advised them to march, stating that he wouldn't risk a battle against their will, but that he would take only the 10th Legion to face the barbarians. However, even his beloved legion had moments of discontent. Before departing for a battle in North Africa, the 10th Legion, along with the 7th and 9th, engaged in a mutiny, demanding overdue pay, discharge, and land. Caesar, known for being a firm but fair leader, initially granted them all their discharge. However, the legions, realizing they loved war and didn't want to give it up, asked their general to put them back into action. Caesar allowed the legion to return to active duty, but never forgot the incident, later taking revenge on the leaders involved. Soon, I will create a video dedicated to explaining what motivated this rebellion within Caesar's legions. The 10th Legion continued to serve under Caesar until his death in 44 BC. After his death, the legion was transferred to the young Octavian, who relocated it to Macedonia. Its veterans were settled in Patras, but after a revolt against Octavian, the legion lost its title of equestrians. With the addition of new legionaries from other regions, it was renamed the 10th Legion Gemina. It is unclear whether the legion served under Octavian in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. From Macedonia, the 10th was sent east and stationed in Syria. Military campaigns in Armenia, 17 AD, 58 AD. In 17 AD, the 10th Legion was stationed in Zeugma, guarding the crossing of the Euphrates River. In 19 AD, the Roman commander Germanicus, nephew of Emperor Tiberius, was on a diplomatic mission in Syria. At that time, Germanicus saw himself as the commander of the Roman forces in the east. Many, including the historian Tacitus, believe that he was there to monitor the behavior of the governor Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso. Germanicus temporarily left Syria to visit Egypt, but ordered the governor to march with his legions, including the 10th, into Armenia. Upon his return, Germanicus discovered that Piso had disobeyed his orders. Furious, Germanicus ordered Piso to return to Rome. Tacitus wrote about the conflict and Piso's arrogance, even after receiving clear orders. Part of the legions was sent to Armenia, and eventually the two armies met, establishing their winter quarters with the 10th Legion. Each commander maintained their own vision and control, with Germanicus avoiding any appearance of threat. Germanicus died shortly after, and rumors circulated that Piso himself had poisoned him. After this event, Piso faced trial in the Roman Senate, but committed suicide before the verdict was delivered. Little is known about the 10th Legion until 54 AD, when it took part in the Armenian campaigns led by Gnaeus Domitius Corbulo. Like Caesar before him, Corbulo recognized the legion's resilience and chose the 10th and the 6th to lead his campaign. However, the legions were not in ideal physical condition for battle, so the commander subjected them to a rigorous training regimen. Reinforced with elements of the 3rd Gallic Legion, they marched into Armenia in 58 AD. Corbulo positioned the 10th in the center, the 6th on the left, and the 3rd on the right. The legions quickly conquered the city of Volandum, where all adult males were executed. The siege and destruction of Jerusalem, 66 AD, 70 AD. In 66 AD, Vespasian and his son Titus were sent by Nero to lead a counteroffensive to suppress the Jewish revolt. The future emperor commanded the 5th, 15th, 10th, and 3rd legions. In June 67 AD, he marched into Galilee, where after a 47-day siege, 40,000 people lost their lives. In the spring of 68 AD, the 3rd Legion was transferred from Vespasian's army and sent to Media. Without the 3rd, the 10th Legion advanced across the Jordan and captured Jericho. In 70 AD, the Legion was assigned the task of capturing Jerusalem. Along with 5 other legions, the 10th marched against the city, and by May, the first of the city's 3 walls began to crumble under the Roman siege. However, a Jewish counterattack forced the legions to retreat temporarily. With the eventual collapse of the 1st and 2nd walls, the Jewish defenders fell back to the 3rd wall. In August, Titus initiated the final assault. The attack was a brutal affair. During the final siege, the temple was set ablaze, and some blamed Titus for the fire. As the city burned, the legionaries looted it. The city took 4 months to fall, with approximately 1 million people killed and 70,000 taken prisoner. The 10th Legion then remained in Jerusalem as the resident legion, establishing a base in the burned ruins. Evidence suggests that the 10th Legion continued to be based in Jerusalem for up to 150 years after the destruction. By the mid-200s and 30s AD, little is known about the legion's activities. But now, what do you think about learning more about this crucial legion in the conquests of Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Top 10 Greatest Roman Gladiators, Heroes of the Colosseum. Although the life of a gladiator was short, this profession was one of the most glamorous in ancient Rome. Gladiatorial battles attracted crowds, including the elite of Roman society. In this video, we present a list of the 10 greatest Roman gladiators. Spartacus. Spartacus, born as a Thracian soldier, was captured by the Romans and then sold as a slave. His owner owned a gladiator school in Capua and saw the opportunity ready to profit from Spartacus's skills as a gladiator. However, a true soldier values his freedom above all else. Soon, Spartacus helped plan a rebellion that culminated with about 30 gladiators escaping the school, all well-armed with improvised weapons. Crixus was among the fugitives and soon became Spartacus's right-hand man. Together, they escaped the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, liberating many other slaves along the way, significantly increasing their numbers. Spartacus accumulated a large fighting force and demonstrated such skill that he managed to defeat Roman legions sent to capture him on more than 6 different occasions. In 71 BC, Marcus Licinius Crassus led a well-trained force of 50,000 men to quell the rebels. Spartacus could not withstand the calculated attack of the Roman army and was eventually killed in southern Italy, thus ending the story of the most famous and well-known gladiator in Roman history, Flamma. The 9th gladiator on our list is Flamma, one of the most renowned names among ancient Roman gladiators. His true name is unknown. Flamma, meaning flame in Latin, was his battle name. This nickname was justified by his record as a formidable gladiator. Before starting his career as a gladiator, Flamma was a Syrian soldier who was captured and thrown into the arena to face a powerful adversary. Destined for a quick death, he surprised everyone by dominating numerous opponents in the grand arena of the Colosseum, using only a small sword and a shield, as well as armor that protected only half of his body. Flamma terrorized his opponents for about 13 years in fights that attracted a large number of spectators. By the time he died at the age of 30, Flamma had fought in 34 battles, winning 21, drawing 9, and losing only 4. He was awarded the Rudes, a small wooden sword symbolizing freedom, on 4 different occasions. However, each time he refused the offer and continued to pursue his life as a warrior. Crixus, a famous military leader during the Third Servile War, was a Gaulish gladiator known for his success against larger adversaries. He despised the leader of his gladiator school, who was also his owner. When a revolt broke out at the training school, Crixus was one of the 70 gladiators who escaped. He played a crucial role in defeating a small group of soldiers sent to suppress the rebellion. Other fugitive gladiators joined him, forming a powerful group. However, Crixus's main goal was revenge against the Roman elite. This caused a conflict between him and the rebellion leader, resulting in Crixus and his supporters separating, intending to devastate southern Italy. Fate, however, had different plans. The Roman legions located Crixus before he could launch a surprise attack. In a desperate battle, he fought bravely, but was ultimately killed by the Romans. Carpophorus. In the era of Roman gladiators, there were the bestiarii. Gladiators specialized in fighting wild animals, a profession known for its short life expectancy. Carpophorus was a celebrated bestiarius, instinctively talented when it came to fighting wild animals, and he was much more skilled at fighting animals in the arena than in hand-to-hand combat with other gladiators. Carpophorus frequently faced wild animals such as lions, bears, leopards, and rhinoceroses. At the opening of the famous Flavian amphitheater, he defeated bears, lions, and leopards in a single battle. On another occasion, he killed a fierce rhinoceros with a single spear. However, his most notable performance, and the crowd's favorite, was when he killed 20 different beasts in a single battle. Priscus and Verus. Priscus and Verus were competent gladiators who won several fights in their careers, but they are best known for the legendary final battle they fought against each other. This epic fight took place in the 1st century AD in the famous Flavian amphitheater and was the first major spectacle held in the arena. The poet Martial documented the battle in detail. After hours of intense combat, the 2 warriors surrendered simultaneously in a gesture of mutual respect for each other's skill and courage. The crowd applauded the gesture, and the event organizer, Emperor Titus, moved by the conclusion of the battle, awarded both the Rudes, a small wooden sword symbolizing freedom for retired gladiators. Hermes little is known about the life of the Roman gladiator Hermes, but he received generous praise from the contemporary Roman poet Martial, who dedicated an entire poem to praising his skills as a gladiator. In the poem, each line begins with the name Hermes, and Martial describes him as an extremely skilled fighter who dominated his opponents. Unlike most gladiators who chose a specific fighting style, Hermes was trained in various weapons and gladiatorial techniques, giving him a great advantage over his adversaries. Tetrates. Tetrates was initially discovered through graffiti found in Pompeii in 1817, illustrating his courageous victory over Pruris. He became a popular gladiator in ancient Rome, famous for his victories fighting without a breastplate and in the Milan style, using a short sword and a large rectangular shield. Although many details of his fights are not well documented, he is known for his victory over Pruris. The names of both are represented on glass vases found in France, England, and Hungary, marking the moment when his fame reached new heights. Spiculus. Spiculus was one of the most famous gladiators of the 1st century AD. He was popular with the public and highly admired by Emperor Nero, who granted him palaces and wealth. Spiculus won several battles against skilled adversaries. Nero was so impressed with his heroism that, when he was overthrown in 68 AD, he wanted to die quickly at Spiculus's hands, but his advisors couldn't find Spiculus in time, and Nero took his own life. Spiculus's fame was not limited to his relationship with Nero. His representations in various ancient Roman artworks testify to his widespread popularity. Subscribe to our channel and become a centurion, and also leave comments with other video suggestions we can make. See you next time. Caesar's Ninth Legion. The Ninth Legion served under the command of Julius Caesar during his tenure as governor of Hispania Ulterior, and later in the Gallic Wars and against Pompey in the Civil Wars. During this period, the legion faced a near-fatal rebellion in Placentia in northern Italy. The army protested against low wages and the lack of war spoils, which often supplemented the pay of Roman legionaries. Julius Caesar, known for being a wise and firm leader, decided to address the legions as a whole. He threatened to decimate the entire Ninth Legion as punishment and as an example. After his speech, the legionaries pleaded with Caesar to spare the legion, reminding him of their proud and loyal service in the past. Caesar agreed on the condition that he would receive the names of the rebellion leaders. 12 of them were chosen and executed. With this incident resolved, Caesar and his legions continued their campaign against Pompey. Later, the Ninth Legion was utilized by Octavian in his war against Mark Antony, and also participated in the Cantabrian Wars, where it earned the title Hispaniensis, later shortened to Hispana. Mutiny under Tiberius, 14 AD. In 14 AD, the Ninth Legion was stationed in Pannonia when Emperor Augustus died. Like other legions on the empire's border, the Ninth became disordered and entered into rebellion upon learning of the emperor's death and Tiberius's ascension. Rebellion of the legions in Pannonia. 3 legions in the province allowed their soldiers to rest from their military duties. One soldier named Pes Ennio began to incite his fellow legionaries, speaking about low wages and the hardships of military service while being cheered on by the others. However, Ennio did not wish for the situation to escalate into a revolt. A messenger was sent to Rome to present the soldiers' concerns. Unfortunately, the calm did not last long, and the mutiny erupted into violence. The dispute involved 2 legions, the 8th and the 10th, which began fighting each other. The soldiers of the Ninth Legion pleaded and then threatened the 2 legions to stop the pointless fight. Upon learning of the revolt, Tiberius sent his son Drusus to Pannonia. Upon his arrival, Drusus found the legionaries beginning to abandon the rebellion. Seizing the opportunity, Drusus ordered the centurions to walk through the camp and talk to the legionaries. The mutiny was finally suppressed when Drusus addressed the men, stating that he would not tolerate being threatened by anyone. He ordered that the main leaders of the revolt, including Pes Ennio, be executed. A search was conducted throughout the camp, and the leaders were immediately killed by the centurions. Fearing the worst, the rebellious legions decided to return to their winter quarters. Campaigns of the Ninth Legion, 20 AD, 69 AD. In 20 AD, the Ninth Legion, now under the command of Caio, was sent from Pannonia to North Africa to assist the 3rd Legion Augusta in its campaign against Tacfarinas and his nomadic army in the region. Pursuit and punishment. A centurion named Pes Ennio led a cohort of 480 men of the Ninth Legion in pursuit of Tacfarinas. However, the inexperienced legionaries acted cowardly and fled back to the camp, leaving Ennio alone to die. Governor Lucius Apollonius was furious with the desertion and demanded the decimation of that cohort. 2 years later, with the war near its end and Tacfarinas defeated, the Ninth Legion was sent back home. Campaigns in Britannia. In In the following 2 decades, the Ninth Legion remained active, participating in the invasion of Britannia by Claudius in 43 AD, along with the 2nd, 6th, and 20th Legions. Little is known about the activities of the Ninth Legion in Britannia until 60-61 AD, during the revolt led by Boudica. Under the command of Petilius Carialis, 4 cohorts of the Ninth were ambushed by rebels led by Boudica en route to Camulodunum and were almost wiped out. Carialis and part of the cavalry survived, and later, 2,000 men of the 21st Legion were sent to replace the fallen legionaries of the 9th, year of the 4 emperors, and march with Vitellius. In 69 AD, during the year of the 4 emperors, the cohorts of the 9th and other legions marched alongside Vitellius against Emperor Otho in the first battle of Bedriacum, and continued with him in his defeat in the second battle, this time against Vespasian. Theories about the disappearance of the 9th Legion. In 83 AD, the governor of Britannia, Gnaeus Julius Agricola, took the 9th Legion to Scotland to fight the Caledonians, where the legion suffered a major defeat. There is some evidence suggesting that the legion was with Domitian in Dacia between 86 and 88 AD, but little else is known about the final fate of the 9th Legion. The 9th Legion was last mentioned in records around 120 AD, when it then completely disappeared. There are several theories about what really happened to the legion. The most accepted theory by historians is that the 9th was exterminated by the Caledonians in Scotland in 122 AD, losing its eagle and sacred standards. A book exploring this view is The Eagle of the 9th, which was even adapted into a Hollywood film. I'll leave a link to the book in the description. This theory is supported by the fact that the 9th Legion was further north than all other British legions and did not participate in the construction of Hadrian's Wall, according to records. Some suggest that the 9th may have started building a wall to keep the barbarian peoples to the north out of Britannia. Another possibility discussed is that the Caledonians lured the commander of the 9th to a meeting to discuss terms of peace. Emperor Hadrian wanted peace, not war, and had no ambitions to expand the empire's borders. Knowing this, the commander might have taken the legion with him to the meeting, where the Caledonians then attacked and destroyed the 9th completely. However, some disagree with this theory, arguing that records show 2 officers who served in the region and had long careers after 120 AD. This leads to the second theory. Some speculate that the 9th was destroyed in Judea during the Bar Kokhba revolt, which occurred between 132 and 135 AD. However, the theory that the 9th Legion was destroyed during the Bar Kokhba revolt faces problems, as there is no evidence of the legion leaving Britannia or being stationed in the east. The only legions involved in that revolt were the 10th and the 6th. Another theory suggests that the 9th was annihilated by the Parthians in 161 AD. This idea is based on the statement of the historian Cassius Dio, who mentioned the destruction of a legion by the Parthians in Armenia in 161 AD. However, the only legion recorded in that region was the 22nd. There is also a fourth theory, based on inscriptions found in the Netherlands, indicating the presence of the 9th Legion on the Rhine River in 122 AD, suggesting that its end might have occurred there. Thus, there is no consensus among historians about the final fate of the 9th Legion. Despite the uncertainties, it is undeniable that the 9th Legion had a long and tumultuous history, facing decimations, surviving mutinies, and being known as the Lost Legion. We will probably never know for sure what really happened, but I would like to know your opinion. What do you think happened to the 9th Legion? Leave your comment, and if you like this video, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Caligula, the mad emperor of Rome. In the annals of Roman history, few figures have evoked as much fear and fascination as Caligula, the infamous emperor whose reign was marked by cruelty, extravagance, and sheer madness. Born on August 31st, 12 AD, as Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, Caligula's life began under the shadow of a prestigious lineage. He was the 3rd son of Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder, linking him to the revered Julio-Claudian dynasty. However, However, the path that lay ahead for Caligula would lead him from the heights of power to a legacy of infamy. Caligula's childhood was steeped in tragedy and loss. His father, Germanicus, was a celebrated general, often hailed as one of the greatest military minds of his time. From a young age, Caligula accompanied his father on military campaigns, earning the nickname Caligula, meaning little boots, from the soldiers who adored him. However, this idyllic image was shattered in 19 AD when Germanicus embarked on a critical mission to Egypt, a province vital to Rome's grain supply. His arrival there, against the direct orders of Emperor Tiberius, sparked tensions that would ultimately lead to his mysterious death. The sudden and suspicious death of Germanicus sent shockwaves through Rome. Many speculated that he had been poisoned by Piso, the governor of Syria, under orders from Tiberius himself. This tragedy deeply affected young Caligula and set the stage for his tumultuous relationship with the imperial throne. After Germanicus's death, Agrippina returned to Rome with her children, determined to seek justice for her husband. Her journey became a national mourning event, with citizens and magistrates paying their respects as she carried her husband's ashes to Rome. The Senate and the people of Rome grieved the loss of a beloved leader, while suspicion towards Tiberius grew. Agrippina's defiance of Tiberius's rule only fueled the emperor's paranoia. Tensions between Agrippina and Tiberius escalated as she publicly accused the emperor and his advisor, Sejanus, of orchestrating Germanicus's murder. Sejanus, who had risen to power as the head of the Praetorian Guard, was a master manipulator who sought to eliminate any threat to his influence. He launched a smear campaign against Agrippina and her sons, turning the imperial court against them. In 23 AD, Drusus, Tiberius's son, died under suspicious circumstances, further complicating the power dynamics within the empire. As Sejanus tightened his grip on power, Agrippina's sons, especially Nero, gained popularity in the Senate. Fearing their growing influence, Sejanus orchestrated a campaign of political trials, leading to the exile of Agrippina and the death of her son Nero. Agrippina herself died under mysterious circumstances, likely from starvation in exile, in 33 AD. During this period of turmoil, Caligula was raised under the watchful eye of his grandmother, Antonia Minor. In 31 AD, he was sent to the island of Capri, where he lived under the supervision of Tiberius. While on Capri, Caligula developed his skills as an orator and actor, masking his deep-seated resentment for the man who had brought so much suffering to his family. In 31 AD, Sejanus, once the most powerful man in Rome, was accused of conspiracy against Tiberius and executed. Caligula's fortunes began to change as he was appointed quaestor in 33 AD, a position that prepared him for the political challenges ahead. When Tiberius died on March 16, 37 AD, rumors swirled that Caligula had smothered the emperor with a pillow. On the same day, the Praetorian Guard proclaimed Caligula emperor, and he was granted full imperial powers upon his arrival in Rome on March 28. The early months of Caligula's reign were marked by relative calm and popularity, largely due to his connection with his late father Germanicus. To solidify his rule, Caligula fulfilled the provisions of Tiberius's will, doubling the payment to the Praetorian Guard and distributing bonuses to the troops and citizens of Rome. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly stable reign, dark clouds were gathering. In 37 AD, Caligula fell gravely ill, teetering on the brink of death. Upon his recovery, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He began to purge those he perceived as threats, including his co-heir, Gemellus, who was forced to commit suicide under accusations of treason. Even his former ally Macro, the Praetorian prefect, was not spared, as Caligula ordered his execution. Subscribe and like the video so we can make more videos. Thank you. Caligula's reign quickly descended into a nightmare of extravagance and terror. His lavish spending on grandiose projects, such as a 3-mile-long floating bridge across the Bay of Baiae, demonstrated his insatiable desire for glory, regardless of practicality. He famously adorned his horse, Incitatus, with jewels, and even considered appointing it as a consul of Rome. Caligula's disdain for the Senate was palpable, as he ridiculed its members and made unilateral decisions without consulting them. His infamous quote, "Let them hate me so long as they fear me," encapsulated encapsulated his tyrannical approach to power. As Caligula's behavior grew more erratic, his relationship with the Senate deteriorated further. He introduced a monetary reform, minting coins with his own image and declaring himself a god. This audacious move alienated the Senate and spurred multiple conspiracies against him. Caligula's military campaigns, while occasionally successful, often lacked clear strategic objectives. His bizarre command to collect seashells during a planned invasion of Britain exemplified the irrationality that had come to define his reign. Caligula's obsession with being worshipped as a deity also brought him into conflict with the Jewish population. When the Jews refused to recognize him as a god, he ordered a colossal statue of himself to be erected in the Temple of Jerusalem. The statue was en route to Jerusalem when news of Caligula's death reached the city, halting its installation and averting a potential catastrophe. Caligula's reign came to a violent end on January 24th, 41st AD, when a group of Praetorian guards, led by Cassius Chaerea, decided to put an end to the emperor's tyranny. During a festival at the imperial palace, they attacked Caligula, stabbing him repeatedly. The assassination was not just an act of vengeance, it was a response to the emperor's frequent insults, particularly against Chaerea. The aftermath of Caligula's death saw his wife, Caesonia, and their daughter also brutally murdered as the conspirators sought to eradicate any trace of his lineage. Rome was thrown into a brief period of chaos following Caligula's assassination. The Senate attempted to restore the Republic, but the Praetorian Guard, recognizing their own power, quickly proclaimed Caligula's uncle, Claudius, as the new emperor. Claudius, initially hesitant, accepted the throne and, ironically, brought a period of relative stability to the Roman Empire after the storm that had been his nephew's reign. Caligula's legacy, however, remained shrouded in horror and mystery. His madness and tyranny became legendary, with ancient writers like Suetonius and Tacitus portraying him as the worst of tyrants, a man whose absolute power utterly corrupted him. While these accounts were often exaggerated, they served as stark warnings about the dangers of granting unlimited power to a single individual. Despite his brief time on the throne, Caligula left an indelible mark on Roman history. His reign exposed the vulnerabilities of the imperial system and foreshadowed the challenges that Rome would face in the coming decades. While many prefer to remember him as a mad tyrant, there are those who see in his story a reflection on the dangers of concentrated power and the fragility of the human psyche when subjected to absolute rule. In the end, Caligula's rise and fall serve as a lasting reminder that, in the vast tapestry of history, even the most powerful can be brought low, and that madness, when coupled with power, can turn heroes into monsters. Join us and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy the video and be a Praetorian. Thank you, my friend. Constantinople and Byzantium. The city of Constantinople, also known as New Rome, was one of the most fascinating cities of antiquity and the Middle Ages. Few cities have captivated people's minds as much as this powerful fortified city on the Bosphorus Strait. What did the city look like when it was still called Byzantium, that is, before 330 AD? Constantinople was undoubtedly one of the greatest cities humanity has ever seen. Although it was quite different from Rome in many aspects, it still retained much of the imperial splendor of classical antiquity. The city boasted wide imperial avenues with columns, especially the main street that traversed all the imperial forums from west to east until reaching the Augustaion, the central forum of the city. There, one would find magnificent structures such as Hagia Sophia, the Magnara, and the Column of Justinian. However, Constantinople was a Christian capital and, as such, was in many ways distinctly different from the ancient classical cities, as no more temples were built for the worship of the old gods. Byzantium, on the other hand, was the name of the city before it was transformed into a new capital of the Roman Empire by Constantine after 324 AD, with its dedication ceremony taking place in 330 AD. It was a completely pagan city with a classical Greek appearance in all aspects. Therefore, Istanbul must have looked very different from Byzantium. The city of of Byzantium, or Byzantium as it was called by the Greeks, was founded as a colony of Megara in the 7th century BC. The origin of the name Byzantium may derive from a Thracian personal name Byzas, or according to Greek legend, from the Greek king Byzas, leader of the Megarian colonists who founded the city. However, the former version is more likely, as archaeological evidence shows that Byzantium was preceded by a Thracian settlement dating back to before the first millennium BC. In fact, the Bosporus Peninsula was inhabited as early as 5500 BC during the Neolithic Age. Pliny the Elder, in his work Natural History, refers to the city as Lygos. This Thracian settlement was located to the northeast of the peninsula, near where the Topkapi Palace stands today. It is very likely that the Greek colonizers from Megara merely expanded the existing Thracian settlement when they arrived, which happened after 667 BC, according to Herodotus, or possibly a bit later in 656 BC, according to Eusebius. The earlier date was favored by Constantine, as he could then celebrate the 1000th anniversary of Byzantium between 300 and 330 AD, after the city was rededicated as New Rome or Constantinople. The Greek city was rebuilt on top of a pre-existing Thracian settlement and in classical Greek style. All the buildings attributed to the Hellenistic classical culture were constructed, and the city experienced rapid development. The growth in the following years was rapid, but what did Greek Byzantium look like around 500 BC? Well, information on this is scarce because archaeological excavations in Istanbul are notoriously difficult, and even reconstructing Constantinople from 1,000 years later proves to be a real challenge. Still, the excellent site Byzantium 1200, which is essential for anyone interested in Constantinople, shows us not only what Constantinople might have looked like at its peak, but also how Greek Byzantium might have appeared to an observer long before it became New Rome. Note, however, that this is an attempt at reconstruction and only an estimate of the city's urban layout. Only the location of the city wall, the Acropolis, the amphitheater, and possibly the stadium is somewhat well reconstructible, while the exact location of other buildings is often unknown. The city was surrounded by walls, and we see that the entire city occupied only a small part of the future Constantinople. In fact, only the easternmost part of the peninsula was colonized, as we can see extending from where the baths of Zeuxippus would later be in the south to the north, as well as to the east limited by the sea, and to the west reaching perhaps as far as the later Strategian site. In this excellent reconstruction image from Byzantium 1200, north is in the bottom right corner of the image. On the Acropolis, which was exactly where the Topkapi Palace Museum stands today, there were three classical Greek temples. The Temple of Aphrodite, followed by the Temple of Apollo and the Temple of Artemis, were located at the northernmost point of the peninsula, where there might also have been the Temple of Poseidon and Athena. There was the Temple of Demeter, the Temple of Kor, another smaller Temple of Apollo, a Temple of Helios, the Temple of Selene, the Temple of Pluto, the Temple of Hera, a large water area, and finally the Tetrastoon, which was a structure with columns on four sides. The city probably retained this appearance for hundreds of years. After 146 BC, when Greece was conquered by Rome, Thrace became a tributary state of Rome. Later, in the 1st century BC, it became a vassal state, and finally, in 46 AD, Thrace became a Roman province. It is quite likely that after this, the city began to become more Roman in appearance. After the reconstruction by Septimius Severus, an amphitheater for gladiator games was probably added. Roman baths were almost certainly built. Like many other Greek cities in the Roman Empire, the city maintained its ancient classical Greek appearance but merged with Roman architecture. The city, now called Byzantium, merely a Latinized version of the original Greek name, played an important role in the Roman Civil War after the death of Commodus in 192 AD, when the city allied with the rival of Emperor Septimius Severus. After being defeated by Septimius Severus, the city underwent significant changes. Byzantium was besieged and significantly damaged in 196 AD. The city was then rebuilt in the same year by order of Septimius Severus, and we can assume that after that the city took on a much more Roman appearance. However, the temples on the Acropolis, if damaged, would certainly have been rebuilt since classical paganism was still alive and intact at that time. The city was renamed renamed Augusta Antonina in honor of Septimius Severus's son Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, better known as Caracalla. After Caracalla's death in 217 AD, the city was renamed Constantinople. The city and the Roman Empire, after Severus's reconstruction, had already grown much more than the ancient Constantinople and now extended to the west, where more than a century later, the Forum of Constantine would be located. Just like the Greek city of Constantinople, we don't know much about the urban structure of the city when it was called Augusta Antonina. It certainly had a very pagan appearance, with temples on the Acropolis standing out above all. Many forums, temples, baths, amphitheaters, and certainly aqueducts. Byzantium continued to prosper so much that by around 300 AD, it must have been an incredible city to behold and a rich center of commerce and business, being perfectly situated on the Bosphorus, a strategic point controlling trade between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. It's remarkable that Byzantium caught the attention of a Roman emperor increasingly discontent with Old Rome, which was not yet ready to become a Christian capital. Paganism was deeply rooted in the society of the Western Roman Empire. However, Byzantium, thought Constantine, was not only strategically located closer to the wealthy eastern provinces and the borders with Persia, but also more easily fortifiable than Old Rome, which was surrounded by land on all sides. The transformation of Byzantium into Constantinople was significant. Byzantium, however, was surrounded by water on three sides and could thus be transformed into an impregnable fortress. Therefore, Constantine chose Byzantium as his new capital and, as early as 324 AD, after his victory over Licinius, began the work to greatly expand and beautify the city. For 6 years, the work continued. Many new buildings were constructed, and the city expanded further west, far beyond the Severan walls. In one of his most controversial acts, of which unfortunately there are many, Constantine plundered Old Rome of many statues and other riches to adorn his new Rome. Many impressive monuments were built, such as the Philadelphian, still quite pagan and classical in appearance, the Great Nymphaeum, and of course the Forum of Constantine with the impressive Senate building and a column on which the emperor had a statue of himself placed, resembling the sun god. It's remarkable that Byzantium caught the attention of a Roman emperor who was increasingly discontent with Old Rome, as it was not yet ready to become a Christian capital. Paganism was deeply rooted in the society of the Western Roman Empire. However, this Byzantium, thought Constantine, was not only strategically located closer to the wealthy eastern provinces and the borders with Persia, but also more easily fortifiable than Old Rome, which was surrounded by land on all sides. The transformation of Byzantium into Constantinople was significant. Surrounded by water on three sides, Byzantium could be turned into an impregnable fortress. Thus, Constantine chose Byzantium as his new capital, and in 324 AD, after defeating Licinius, began the work of greatly expanding and beautifying the city. Over 6 years, many new buildings were constructed, and the city expanded further west, far beyond the Severan walls. In one of his most controversial acts, Constantine plundered Old Rome of many statues and other riches to adorn his new Rome. Many impressive monuments were built, such as the Philadelphian, still quite pagan and classical in appearance, the Great Nymphaeum, and of course the Forum of Constantine, with the imposing Senate building and a column on which the emperor placed a statue of himself resembling the god Sol Invictus. The appearance of Constantinople after Constantine's dedication, and of course the enormous city walls on the far west, when Constantine dedicated the city in a grand ceremony in 330 AD as New Rome. It was built on 7 hills, reminiscent of Rome. At that time, the Acropolis, with its pagan temples, was likely still in good condition, and many newly constructed buildings, such as the Senate building with its Pantheon-style dome, the Philadelphian, the Great Nymphaeum, the colonnaded Macy, and the Grand Forum and Column of Constantine, gave the city a classical and imperial Roman appearance. It was only in the following centuries that the city became visibly more Christian, so that by the time of Justinian, 200 years later, the city could be called truly Christian in appearance. However, as we've seen in this video, the city still retained many of its ancient classical features. Even so, the city would never again appear as Greek as it did when it was called Byzantium. Byzantium, nor as fully Roman as when it was known as Augusta Antonina. The era of Byzantium truly came to an end, and the rise of Constantinople began. Subscribe to the channel, be a centurion, and like the video. This helps us produce more content. Thank you. Mark Antony had a significant impact on the history of Rome, contributing to the end of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. In this video, we'll explore the internal battles that erupted after the assassination of Julius Caesar, leading to Rome's transition from a republic to an imperial regime. In March 44 BC, Julius Caesar, betrayed even by his protege Brutus, was brutally assassinated in the Senate. Without legitimate heirs under Roman law, the conspirators did not foresee that Caesar had designated a young successor, Gaius Octavian. At the time of Caesar's death, Octavian was in Apollonia, in the Northwest Balkans, where he was studying and undergoing military training. Upon receiving the news, his reaction was one of disbelief and sadness, as it was hard to believe that such a powerful figure had been betrayed in such a humiliating way. Despite advice to take refuge with the troops in Macedonia, Octavian decided not to flee. Instead, he sailed towards Italy. Upon disembarking, he discovered the contents of Caesar's will, which named him heir to 2/3 of Caesar's properties and his political legacy. Thus, Octavian adopted his great-uncle's name, Gaius Julius Caesar, symbolizing his intent to honor the leader's legacy. With limited resources, Octavian had to be strategic in inserting himself into Roman politics. He began by demanding military funds that Caesar had allocated for the war against the Parthian Empire, amassing 700 million sesterces. He also appropriated the annual tribute from the province of the Near East, strengthening his forces with veterans from Caesar's legions, emphasizing his status as Caesar's legitimate heir. His journey culminated in June 44 BC, when he gathered an army of 3,000 loyal veterans and marched towards Rome. There he encountered Mark Antony, an ally of Caesar, who was in a tense standoff with the general's assassins. While Antony had accumulated political support, he also faced growing opposition. Octavian, on the other hand, seized the opportunity to rival him. With the support of the Senate, which named Octavian as a senator and granted him command over troops, he engaged in decisive battles. In April 43 BC, Octavian defeated Antony's forces in 2 battles, including the Battle of Mutina. These victories solidified his position, but also created resentment when the Senate gave more recognition to Brutus, another conspirator. Dissatisfied with his position, Octavian marched on Rome with 8 legions, demanding the consulship, which was granted to him in August 43 BC. However, political maneuvers continued, and Octavian formed an alliance with his former enemies, Mark Antony and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, creating the Second Triumvirate. This agreement consolidated their power, allowing them to rule Rome with near absolute authority. This triumvirate marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of a new imperial era, where Octavian, later known as Augustus, would become Rome's first emperor. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. The actions taken by the trio of Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus were partly motivated by the need to raise funds to pay their troops in preparation for the next conflict against Caesar's assassins, namely Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus. This is evidenced by the encouragement given to Roman citizens to capture the proscribed, as the capture or death of these enemies of the state led to rewards. This situation benefited both the triumvirate and the bounty hunters, as the rulers could seize the assets and properties of the proscribed, while those who turned in Rome's new enemies received significant sums of money. It's worth noting that anyone had the right to kill a proscribed man, and upon delivering his head to the authorities, would be rewarded with the victim's property. Some of the proscribed managed to escape abroad, but many were not so fortunate, and hundreds perished during this dark period of Roman history. This era was so brutal that, after the events, each member of the Second Triumvirate tried to shift the blame onto the others. However, many were surprised by how many enemies Octavian had and how many he was willing to eliminate. In the years that followed, Octavian built a reputation for excessive cruelty. On January 1st, 42 BC, the Senate posthumously recognized Julius Caesar as a deity of the Roman state, which was the ultimate consecration for the ambitious leader who, even in death, gave gained the right to be worshipped forever. This recognition also benefited Octavian, who managed to garner goodwill and admiration from important figures in Roman society by emphasizing his direct connection to a god, being himself the son of a deity. However, Cassius noticed the maneuver and built a barrier, forcing Mark Antony to order a surprise attack on Cassius's camp. This attack was successful, and Cassius, believing all was lost, committed suicide before learning that Brutus had defeated Octavian's army at the same time. This resulted in a victory and a defeat for both sides. Brutus deeply lamented Cassius's death, calling him the last of the Romans, but avoided a public funeral, fearing its negative impact on army morale. The premature plundering and treasure gathering by Brutus's advancing forces allowed Octavian's troops to regroup their lines. In the following 3 weeks, Mark Antony was able to slowly move his forces south of Brutus's army, fortifying a hill near Cassius's former camp, which had been abandoned. To avoid being outflanked, Brutus was forced to extend his line south and then east, building several fortified posts while maintaining the high ground. Brutus's initial plan was to avoid direct confrontation, hoping his naval superiority would wear down the enemy. However, he realized he had no choice but to fight, as his entire position was at risk of isolation if the triumvirs continued advancing eastward. If this happened, Brutus would face starvation or be forced to retreat, leading his entire army along a dangerous northern trail that would take him to Philippi. With few options remaining, Brutus decided to risk everything in one final battle. What neither side could predict was that the battle would be a bloodbath, with much of the fighting taking place hand-to-hand between the two armies of well-trained veterans. Long-range weapons like arrows or darts were largely ignored, as the soldiers lined up in solid ranks and fought face-to-face with swords. According to Cassius Dio, both sides had little need to use long-range weapons, preferring to advance immediately to hand-to-hand combat. Plutarch reports that Brutus initially succeeded in the fight on the far west of his line, pressing hard on the left wing of the triumvirs, who retreated in disorder, pursued by the Republican cavalry. However, the eastern flank of Brutus's line, weakened by being extended to avoid being outflanked, could not withstand the initial assault by the triumvirs. Mark Antony and Octavian, breaking through the center of the enemy line, turned to the flank and rear of Brutus, forcing his legions to retreat. The 3 reserve lines failed to keep up with the retreat, and all were defeated. Octavian managed to capture Brutus's camp before the retreating army could reach this defensive position. Unable to regroup, Brutus's army was completely defeated. Brutus managed to retreat to nearby hills with only 4 legions remaining, but realizing that surrender or capture was inevitable, he committed suicide. After the 2 great battles at Philippi, Octavian and Antony's troops were able to celebrate their decisive victory. Mark Antony later used these events to belittle Octavian, claiming that the victories at Philippi were achieved thanks to his own forces. Many Romans credited Antony for his military leadership and his dignified and honorable conduct in treating captured aristocrats and the remains of the defeated with respect. Despite the ego disputes and the struggle for glory, the most important thing for both was that the triumvirate had successfully secured definitive control over Rome. The main enemies on the battlefield were defeated, and to further consolidate the victor's power, the remaining troops of Brutus were reorganized, with about 14,000 men integrated into the triumvir's army. Lepidus, the weakest link in this alliance, gained control over several African regions of the Republic, while Mark Antony traveled eastward to Egypt, where he allied with Queen Cleopatra, Julius Caesar's former lover, and the mother of his son, Caesarion. Additionally, Antony took control of the provinces and Rome's allies in the eastern Mediterranean. Octavian, on the other hand, was in charge of Gaul and Spain, but he had little time to enjoy this, as he faced a significant challenge. Thousands of veterans who had fought against Brutus now sided with the Second Triumvirate. While this was an advantage, it also posed a risk, as these troops could easily align with a political opponent of Octavian if they were not properly appeased. Furthermore, these veterans were demanding, asking for substantial rewards such as land. Simultaneously, Octavian had to decide where to settle the tens of thousands of veterans from the Macedonian campaign in Italian territory. These men, who had been promised land by the triumvirs, were now demanding their rewards. However, there were no government-controlled lands available for distribution. Faced with this dilemma, Octavian had to make a difficult choice: either disappoint many Roman citizens by confiscating their lands, or displease the Roman soldiers, who could form a dangerous opposition against him. Octavian chose the former option, leading to the expropriation of lands in about 18 Roman cities to create new settlements, displacing or partially evicting their populations. As expected, this decision sparked widespread discontent, encouraging many to side with Lucius Antonius, the brother of Mark Antony, who, with the support of most of the Senate, began to emerge as a new enemy. As these tensions unfolded, Octavian decided to divorce his wife Claudia, the daughter of Fulvia, who was Mark Antony's wife. This decision triggered another crisis, as Fulvia did not accept Claudia's return, especially since the marriage had never been consummated. Fulvia then acted alongside Lucius Antonius, forming an army in Italy to fight against Octavian. With a command of 8 legions, they initially secured some victories but soon faced challenges. Lucius and Fulvia underestimated the importance of the triumvirs in paying the troops' salaries, leading to a decline in morale among the soldiers, who never fought at their full capacity. As a result, Lucius and his allies were surrounded by Octavian's troops in the region of Perugia. After a harsh winter, during which their forces were exhausted and running out of provisions, Lucius was forced to surrender in early 40 BC. However, Lucius and his army were spared due to his kinship with Mark Antony, who at that time was the most powerful and admired man in the world. But fortune did not favor Fulvia, who was exiled to a Greek city, and Octavian showed no mercy to Lucius's allies. On March 15th, the anniversary of Julius Caesar's assassination, Octavian executed 300 Roman senators and knights for allying with Lucius. Perugia was also sacked and burned as a warning to others, an event that tarnished Octavian's reputation, earning him criticism from several Roman historians. However, Octavian believed that demonstrations of strength and cruelty were essential to maintaining power. Over time, tensions subsided, but soon new crises emerged. This time, the catalyst was Sextus Pompey, son of Pompey the Great, who, after Julius Caesar's victory over his father, became a renegade general. Established in Sicily and Sardinia, as part of an agreement with the Second Triumvirate, Sextus Pompey began to threaten Octavian by blocking grain shipments to the Italian peninsula, attempting to cause widespread famine. Sextus Pompey's confidence was justified by the power he had accumulated, gathering a formidable army and a large naval fleet. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Octavian decided to negotiate. In 39 BC, the Treaty of Misenum was signed, suspending Pompey's blockade in exchange for the concession of Sardinia, Corsica, Sicily, and the Peloponnese. However, this agreement was short-lived. When Octavian divorced Scribonia to marry Livia Drusilla on January 17, 38 BC, relations deteriorated further. One of Pompey's naval commanders betrayed him, handing over Corsica and Sardinia to Octavian, who knew he needed help to confront Pompey. As a result, the Second Triumvirate was extended for another 5 years, starting in 37 BC, and Octavian began preparing for war. His general Marcus Agrippa started the preparations by creating a new port called Portus Julius to train ships for naval battles. Meanwhile, Mark Antony offered his assistance, hoping to gain support for his own campaign against the Parthians. In Tarentum, the two leaders struck a new agreement. Antony would provide 120 ships for Octavian to use against Pompey, while Octavian would send 20,000 legionaries to Antony. However, Octavian sent only a fraction of what was promised, which Antony viewed as a deliberate provocation. Despite these differences, both sides were ready for battle. In July of 36 BC, 3 fleets set out to confront Pompey, including a fleet from Lepidus coming from Africa. Under Agrippa's command, Octavian's forces engaged Pompey in a bloody naval battle. Agrippa, using innovative tactics, managed to block and defeat Pompey's fleet. Pompey lost 28 ships, while Octavian suffered minimal losses. Although Octavian achieved an important victory, it was somewhat overshadowed by his defeat and severe injury in a battle near a mine that same month. Meanwhile, Lepidus managed to land most of his army in the interior of Sicily. In 36 BC, Pompey fled from Sicily to Miletus, where in 35 BC BC, he was captured and executed by Marcus Titius, one of Mark Antony's allies, without a trial. As a Roman citizen, Pompey had the right to a trial, making his execution illegal. Despite this crime, the victory was secured, but the power struggles continued unabated. With the end of Pompey's resistance, distrust between the triumvirs intensified. The tension became evident when Octavian visited Lepidus's camp and was acclaimed by the soldiers as the son of Caesar. In a reckless move, Lepidus attempted to expel Octavian from the camp, believing that by accepting the surrender of Pompey's troops, he could claim Sicily for himself. However, this attempt failed as a large part of Lepidus's army deserted to Octavian's side, attracted by the promise of financial rewards. Weakened, Lepidus was accused by Octavian of trying to usurp power and initiate a rebellion, giving Octavian the justification he needed to remove Lepidus from the triumvirate. Humiliated and with no other options, Lepidus surrendered to Octavian, was removed from the triumvirate, but was allowed to retain the title of Pontifex Maximus. With his public career over, Lepidus was effectively exiled to a villa in Italy. After this episode, the Roman territories were divided between Octavian, who took the west, and Mark Antony, who took the east. To maintain peace and stability in their regions, Octavian resettled his soldiers outside Italy and returned 30,000 slaves who had fled to join Pompey's army to their former Roman owners. Confident after his triumph, Octavian also secured from the Senate immunity for himself, his wife Livia, and his sister Octavia to ensure the safety of his family upon their return to Rome. Meanwhile, Mark Antony, who had aided Octavian against Sextus Pompey in hopes of gaining support for his campaign against the Parthians, sent 120 ships, but Octavian responded with only 2,000 men, leading to a humiliating defeat for Mark Antony. This setback damaged Antony's reputation as a military leader and led to further problems. After the Treaty of Brundisium in 40 BC, which sought to strengthen the alliance with Octavian by marrying Octavia, Mark Antony became involved with Cleopatra, which Octavian exploited to further weaken Antony's public image. In 36 BC, the relationship between the two leaders deteriorated further when Octavian proposed that both renounce the triumvirate, a proposal he knew Antony would refuse, solidifying Octavian's image as a defender of the people and painting Antony as authoritarian. In 34 BC, after successfully invading Armenia, Antony distributed titles and honors to his protégés, but Octavian used this against him, claiming that Antony's actions diminished Rome and favored a foreign queen, Cleopatra. With Octavian assuming the consulship again in 33 BC, he attacked Antony in the Senate, accusing him of treason and selfishness. While many senators supported Octavian, others criticized him, creating a divide. However, Octavian's advantage was solidified in the fall of 32 BC when two of Antony's allies, Lucius Plancus and Marcus Titius, switched sides and handed over Antony's secret will to Octavian, which scandalized Rome. The will revealed that Antony planned to leave his wealth and conquests to Cleopatra and her children, an act that Octavian used to persuade the Senate to declare war, not against Antony, but against Cleopatra, framing her as an enemy of Rome. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. As Octavian never allowed anything or anyone to stand in the way of his desires, he pursued the senators who supported Antony. In a wise rhetorical move, he declared that they were not declaring war on Mark Antony, but rather on an enemy of the Roman people, Cleopatra, branding Antony as a traitor to the Republic. This had the desired effect, and by the end of the year 32 BC, the Senate declared war on Cleopatra's regime in Egypt. Many expected Antony to abandon Cleopatra and return to Rome's side, but he did not. Instead, he chose to stand by her. This led the Senate to strip the general of all his official powers and label him an outlaw and a traitor. However, to Octavian's complete dismay, around 40% of the Senate, along with two consuls, abandoned Rome and decided to fight alongside Mark Antony. Chaos and absolute turmoil engulfed the Roman Republic, and many knew that the greatest battle of all time was about to begin, as Octavian and Antony prepared to confront each other to determine once and for all who would rule Rome and the Western world. Octavian ordered one of the largest military call-ups in history, demanding that all his legions and every available man be sent to destroy Mark Antony and his troops. He was successful, managing to gather the impressive number of 200,000 legionaries. Aware of the impending conflict, Antony responded by ordering his own troop call-up, which managed to equal Octavian's numbers, with the general having at his disposal 200,000 men, including both heavy Roman infantry and Egyptian light infantry. The military maneuvers began around mid-year 31 BC. Antony ordered his army to move to Greece, and upon learning of this, Octavian ordered that he be followed by his own forces. However, in addition to his troops, Octavian had also brought with him his main asset for victory, his ally and great military strategist, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, who would command his navy. This navy was one of Octavian's key bets, as unlike the armies, which were more or less the same size, his naval forces were larger than those of Antony and Cleopatra. Furthermore, even though Antony's ships were larger, his naval crews and commanders were very inexperienced, putting them at a disadvantage against Octavian's smaller, more maneuverable ships, manned by seasoned sailors. Subsequently, Octavian moved his troops across the Adriatic Sea, aiming to confront Mark Antony near Actium. At the same time, Agrippa took measures to cut off Antony's army's supply lines, causing significant problems for the general. But despite his strategic advantage, Octavian decided not to attack Antony's men on land, considering it an unnecessary risk and an unwise move. Instead, he preferred to fight at sea, where he knew his navy could defeat the enemy forces more easily. However, neither side made any significant moves, leading to unforeseen problems for Octavian, as many of his men grew tired of waiting for the decisive moment to strike. Demoralized and frustrated, they deserted to Antony's side, who, unlike Octavian, did not face these problems, successfully maintaining the loyalty of his men and commanders. After much waiting, the battles finally began. Octavian sent Agrippa to capture the Greek city and port of Methone, a region that had been loyal to Antony. However, taking this location was not easy because the defenders fought with all their might and brutality to survive. Despite their courage, they were ultimately defeated, as although Mark Antony was a military genius on land, he was no match for a great naval commander like Agrippa at sea. Defeated, Antony decided to move his troops to Actium, where Octavian's navy and army had camped. But this time, Antony was ready to deliver a decisive blow to Octavian and Agrippa's forces. Determined to triumph, Antony brought 290 warships as well as 50 transport vessels. To defend against this massive fleet, Octavian had 350 ships. However, even though his men were more experienced and he had the genius Agrippa on his side, this time it seemed that Antony had a chance of victory because his ships were much larger and better armed. But the die was cast. On September 2nd, 31 BC, the stage was set for the greatest naval battle in Roman history. Antony made his first moves, ordering his ships to sail into the open sea. Upon reaching the open water, they saw Octavian's ships forming up for battle. It is worth noting that Cleopatra was also present at the battle, positioning herself behind Antony's lines. However, as usual, Octavian held the advantage because the heir of Caesar had obtained Antony's battle plans, which involved using his larger ships to overwhelm Agrippa at the northern end of his line. But as Octavian was already aware of this, he ordered Agrippa to keep his ships out of reach. As time passed and action was needed, shortly after noon, Antony extended his line out of the coast's protection and finally decided to face Octavian's fleet. But this was not a good idea. Octavian's men were much better trained and had spent their entire lives honing highly efficient battle techniques, such as ramming enemy ships while simultaneously overwhelming the upper deck crew with a barrage of arrows and stones launched by catapults. When these men confronted Antony's inexperienced sailors, it turned into a massacre. At that moment, seeing the disaster unfold, Cleopatra decided to take action. Following Antony's orders before the battle, she ordered her squadron of ships to try to penetrate the center of Octavian's fleet. Seeing a gap open in Agrippa's formations, Cleopatra commanded the ships to funnel through, causing Antony to issue orders for all his ships to attempt to break through Octavian's lines. He personally led the advance and managed to succeed in this endeavor, reaching the center of Octavian's naval forces. But this strategy failed because Agrippa ordered his ships positioned on the flanks to attack the rest of Antony's fleet from both sides. What followed was a massive slaughter, with Agrippa and Octavian's ships destroying dozens of Antony's vessels, while he and Cleopatra could only watch helplessly as their once powerful fleet was annihilated. Everything was now at stake, causing Antony to fear not only for his life, but for Cleopatra's as well. In the midst of all this disaster, Antony ordered the 90 ships that had not been destroyed to move away from Octavian's forces and head for Alexandria. A portion of his troops who were on land and witnessed the naval battles also retreated, with orders to join their leader in Alexandria. However, Antony had lost complete control over the supply routes for these troops, and as a result, after just over a week, many of Antony's military commanders decided to give up fighting, believing it was impossible to defeat Octavian, and therefore preferred to surrender without further resistance. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. At the end of the hostilities at Actium, Mark Antony had lost a massive portion of his troops and saw his naval fleet almost completely wiped out. Nonetheless, even as they returned to Alexandria empty-handed, Antony and Cleopatra did not intend to surrender, forcing Octavian to follow them to finally defeat his greatest enemies. However, even though he wanted to quickly send troops to Egypt, to his complete frustration and disappointment, Octavian's plans had to be delayed due to internal problems within his own legions. It so happened that many of Octavian's most senior and competent soldiers were veterans who had fought in various wars and battles under the command of his adoptive father, Julius Caesar. To give you an idea, many of these legionaries had been fighting continuously for over 20 years, so after achieving a historic and resounding victory at Actium, these men finally decided to demand what they considered their due. Essentially, around 10 legions of soldiers requested from Octavian their discharge from the army, along with a large sum of money to finance a comfortable retirement. Fearing he might lose the loyalty of many of these men if he treated them poorly, Octavian was forced to comply with the wishes of the vast majority of the senior legionaries who made this request, thus allowing their time in the army to come to an end. So, after resolving this issue with his men, and while waiting anxiously for the winter to pass, Octavian ordered his troops to prepare once again to resume the fight against Antony, but this time in the distant land of Alexandria. However, Octavian knew he needed a very well thought out plan to pursue his enemy at the risk of losing everything he had fought so hard to conquer in recent years. The most obvious and apparent plan was to place his troops on ships and use his powerful navy to completely destroy Alexandria. But this plan was rejected because, as practical as it was, Octavian knew that a strictly naval action would not be enough to finally defeat Antony and his closest allies. Octavian knew that many puppet kingdoms in Asia were loyal to Mark Antony, having even sent troops to aid him in many of his military incursions. Because of this, he understood that to completely destroy any resistance against him, it was necessary not only to defeat Antony in Alexandria, but also to regain control of these puppet kingdoms. For all these reasons, in the spring of 30 BC, Octavian finally abandoned the plans to attack Antony strictly by sea, deciding instead that the most sufficient, though more time-consuming strategy was to send his troops overland, marching through Asia. This proved to be a very wise plan, as well his. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. As the powerful army advanced in search of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, it managed to prevent its enemy from regrouping loyal troops in regions under their control. This made it difficult for the general to maintain control. While this relentless march continued, Mark Antony was preparing to defend himself, but his situation was far from easy. After his defeat at Actium, Antony decided to keep most of his troops in Greece, an impressive force of 23 legions and over 15,000 cavalry. Under normal circumstances, this army could face nearly any force in the world, but the lack of basic supplies made fighting impractical. As a result, his forces surrendered and Antony lost many men who could have been useful. However, Antony still had some powerful allies, including Lucius Benamius, who governed the region of Libya known as Cyrenaica. With Lucius's troops by his side, Antony could have posed serious problems for Octavian. However, upon realizing that Octavian was likely to win, Benamius decided to switch sides. Once Octavian learned of the betrayal, he ordered Lucius Benamius to initiate significant movements. 4 legions under Lucius's command moved east of Alexandria, while Octavian's troops headed west. Upon learning of Benamius's betrayal, Antony and Cleopatra prepared for the final battle, knowing that escaping now would be nearly impossible. Soon, Octavian's troops arrived in Alexandria. With no time to lose, they besieged the city. However, Octavian himself had not yet arrived on the battlefield, leading Antony to consider attacking Lucius's troops, who were theoretically less numerous. If this plan succeeded, Antony believed he could resist Octavian's forces longer, as they would become a more manageable enemy without Benamius's support. Antony ordered his men, about 30,000 soldiers, to prepare for an attack on Benamius's troops. However, underestimating his enemy, Antony encountered forces that were much better prepared and more numerous than he had anticipated. While some historians claim Benamius had about 10,000 men, others suggest his advantage was even greater, possibly doubling Antony's numbers. Despite his efforts, the numerical advantage of Benamius made the situation almost unsustainable. The battle turned brutal and bloody, with Antony's forces quickly breaking down. Still, Antony refused to surrender until his troops were in total collapse. Desperate, Antony fled the battlefield and returned to Alexandria. A few continued to resist, but when it became clear that victory was unattainable and Octavian was about to arrive, what remained of Antony's forces surrendered. The defeat was so overwhelming that even troops not directly involved in the battle chose to surrender without fighting. On August 1st, 30 BC, devastated by the defeat and the news of Cleopatra's death, Antony, in a moment of despair, asked his personal assistant to end his life. However, the assistant could not fulfill the request, and Antony attempted to kill himself by falling on his sword, resulting in a severe wound, but not fatal. After being rescued, Antony learned that Cleopatra was still alive. In their final meeting, he reportedly told her that he was dying with honor and that she could trust a member of Octavian's entourage, Gaius. Cleopatra, who had already been informed that Octavian planned to take her to Rome for a humiliating triumph, chose a more dignified end. On August 10th, 30 BC, Cleopatra allowed a snake, likely brought by a loyal member of her court, to bite her, leading to her death. As for her son Caesarion, a close advisor to Octavian recommended that he be executed, as he could become a problem for Octavian's government. Octavian accepted the recommendation and ordered Caesarion's execution at the end of August that year. After Cleopatra's death, Octavian showed respect for the queen by ordering a grand funeral in Rome for both her and Antony. The funeral was so grand that even legions once commanded by Antony were allowed to march beside the tomb. To complete the gesture, Octavian declared a day of mourning in honor of the general and the Egyptian queen. However, these actions also served to bolster Octavian's image as a benevolent leader who respected even his defeated enemies. Even after this great victory, Octavian knew he could not lower his guard, as new enemies could emerge at any moment. Taking advantage of his success in Egypt, he did not shy away from receiving all possible honors. About a month after defeating Antony and Cleopatra, he was honored as pharaoh, effectively taking control of Egypt and its vast wealth. After returning to Rome, Octavian aimed to consolidate his power to avoid the same fate as Julius Caesar. Unlike many who would rush to consolidate power, Octavian, though young, was methodical, gradually strengthening his position and eliminating remaining supporters of Antony. A few months later, with his loyal ally Agrippa, he achieved another significant political victory by convincing the Senate to grant him command of Gaul and Syria, giving him control over half of Rome's territories. In 27 BC, Octavian made a surprising decision by renouncing his powerful positions in public life, a move that puzzled many, including his closest allies like Agrippa. This seemingly paradoxical decision allowed Octavian to solidify his absolute power, ultimately leading him to become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.